This is Warrior Kid Podcast number 21, Ask Uncle Jake. This podcast is based on the two Way of the Warrior Kid books. The first one, Way of the Warrior Kid, Wimpy to Warrior the Navy SEAL Way, and the second one, Mark's Mission. And the books are about young Mark, who faces a lot of the same problems that kids everywhere face, but Mark gets help solving those problems from his Uncle Jake, who is a Navy SEAL and who stays with Mark in the summertime. And this podcast is for kids to hear some more lessons from Uncle Jake and also to get the chance to ask Uncle Jake some questions. So here's the first question. It comes from Abigail, who is a 9-year-old warrior kid that really loves sports. And she asks, what do you do for fun besides Jiu Jitsu? Besides Jiu Jitsu, which, yes, is certainly at the top of my list of fun things to do, I like to also surf and play guitar, and I have a little band and we play music, and I like to work out, and of course, I like to do things with my wife and my kids. Next question. Was it fun writing Way of the Warrior Kid 1 and 2? Yes, it is actually very fun writing books because what you can do is you can create your whole world or the whole world inside the book. And you also get to create the characters, the people that are in that world. And so that's very fun to do. It allows you to be creative and make things the way you want to make them. And that's definitely fun, and I have a good time doing it. And the next question from Abigail is, I have a dog walking business, and so far I only have one customer. How do I get more? Well, one customer, good start. You're moving in the right direction. Here's maybe one idea. I assume you already hung up some signs around the neighborhood so people know. And the other thing I would do is maybe walk around and tell people, if you know that they have a dog, maybe tell them that you'll give them one free dog walk to get them familiar with the services that you provide and also your skill in walking dogs. So good luck with that, Abigail. The next question is from Van Allen Graves, and he's the brother of Will Graves, who has a broken femur and wrote to me a while ago. And he says, me and Will really like playing Call of Duty a lot, which is a video game if you don't know. How can we stop playing it so much? Well, Van Allen, I have a pretty straightforward answer for you. The way that you stop playing Call of Duty is you stop playing Call of Duty. That's what you do. Call of Duty and these video games, they aren't making you smarter. They aren't making you stronger or healthier. So stop doing them. And I'm glad actually that you recognize that it isn't good for you to play this video game all the time. You realize that it is a weakness. So get some control over this weakness by stop playing. That's what you do. And, you could go even a little bit further. Maybe you can sell that video game machine and whatever games you have, and you can get a pull-up bar or some jiu-jitsu mats for your house. And then you and your brother can do jiu-jitsu instead of playing the game. So give that a try. You don't need to play that game. He also asks, when is the third Way of the Warrior Kid book coming out? And a lot of you kids asked that. And I appreciate that everyone is looking forward to the new Way of the Warrior Kid book. And it will be out in the springtime. The next question is from a warrior kid named Avery, who is 7 years old. And she asks the question, when my brother wants me to stop doing something, he tries to hurt me instead of asking. How do I deal with this? Well, the first thing you do is explain to him and ask him to stop trying to hurt you. Explain to him that it does hurt and that you would be more than happy to stop doing something that is bothering him if he would just ask. And then you have to explain that to him. Like, explain this. He wants you to stop doing something that bothers him. And at the same time, you want him to stop doing something that bothers you. And that thing is that he's trying to hurt you or he is hurting you. So make a little deal with him. The deal is, brother, you stop doing that I will stop doing what's bothering you if you stop hurting me. So there you go. Make a deal with him. Explain it to him. And I'll tell you what, if he keeps it up, you need to tell your parents what's going on so they can help you explain to him and get your brother under control. The next question that Avery asks is, how do I overcome being nervous? And I know a lot of kids ask questions about how to overcome things. And a lot of them have to do with being scared of something or nervous about something. And you can overcome being nervous by doing the thing that actually makes you nervous. But you start with small doses of that thing that makes you nervous, and then you increase. Just like Uncle Jake does with Mark in Way of the Warrior Kid. Mark is nervous and scared about the water, so Uncle Jake starts him wading, and then they go a little bit deeper, and then he dunks his head. Eventually they go swimming. So that's what you need to do. Do the same thing with whatever it is that makes you nervous. Do a little bit of it. Then do it a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, until it doesn't make you nervous anymore. And everybody that's listening to this should know that if there's something that makes you scared or something that makes you nervous, you don't need to ask. You can just follow what Uncle Jake did for Mark in the first Way of the Warrior Kid book. Just take a little bit of that thing that makes you nervous and then increase it over time. And the next question, and the last question from Avery, is, do you eat cake on your birthday? I see what you're trying to do, Avery. Well, actually, luckily for me, I don't really like cake very much. But I do like mint chocolate chip ice cream very much. So on my birthday, I like to earn it. I usually do some kind of a really hard workout, or 2 hard workouts, or sometimes even 3 hard workouts. And then I will have myself a giant mint chocolate chip milkshake, and it will be very tasty. Thank you, Avery. The next question is from Kane, who is a 9-year-old warrior kid that trains Jiu Jitsu and surfs and fishes with his dad. And his first question is, have you ever made a Molk popsicle? So if you haven't had Molk yet, it's a powder, a protein powder that you can mix with milk, and it tastes very good, and it has extra protein and vitamins in it, and so it makes you strong. And apparently what Kane does is makes Molk and then probably puts it in some kind of a cup with a stick in it, turns it upside down, and puts it in the freezer and turns it into a popsicle. So I have not done that yet, but it sounds like a very good idea. I might have to give that one a try. The next question from Kane is, what was the hardest jiu-jitsu move for you to learn? There are some good moves in jiu-jitsu that take a lot of flexibility. Moves like the rubber guard, and there's another move called the go-go plata. And I personally am not very flexible, so those are the hardest moves for me to learn and to do. And I'll tell you what, I should be stretching more. And for all you kids out there that are listening, what's beautiful about, one of the most beautiful things about being a kid is that you are naturally flexible. You are born flexible. But if you don't stretch, you will lose flexibility over time. So keep stretching, and that will make your jiu-jitsu and really every physical activity that you do, it'll make it all easier. So give that a try. Next question comes from someone, I didn't get the name of this warrior kid, although I know that he does have a sister named Mila, so I'm sorry, buddy, that I missed your name. His question is, sometimes I answer questions on my tests wrong, even though I study really hard and know the subjects of the test. This happens because I want to be the first one done in my class to finish. Do you have any ideas to help me slow down? Yes. First of all, you need to remember that tests are not races to see how fast you can go. In fact, part of the test is seeing if you can slow down and seeing if you can concentrate and seeing if you can focus and seeing if you can confirm that your answers are correct. So one way to slow down is when you get done and you're all excited, instead of turning it in, actually go back, start the test again, and reconfirm that all your answers are correct. And yes, that does mean you're going to do them all again. But that is a way to make sure that you haven't rushed any answers and put them in wrong, and you get a bad grade because you tried to win a race that doesn't even exist. Slow down, buddy. The next one is a question from the same kid about his sister Mila, who likes gymnastics, cheerleading, and Jiu Jitsu. What would be good exercises to do for both gymnastics and Jiu Jitsu? Well, I'll tell you right now, Mila, if she is doing gymnastics, cheerleading, and Jiu Jitsu, she's probably getting all the exercise that she needs. Gymnastics requires a lot of pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups and rope climbs and swinging on bars, and that's great. And cheerleading requires all kinds of lower body explosiveness, squats and jumping and tumbling, and all those things together are perfect for jiu-jitsu. So tell Mila to keep doing what she's doing, and you know what? You might want to join her in some of those exercises because they will make you stronger as well. And this warrior kid also sent me a joke, which I'll read. What's the best way to unlock the jiu-jitsu gym? And the answer is key lock. And I suppose that's funny. If you don't know what a key lock is, it is a move in jiu-jitsu. So thanks for the joke. And thanks for the questions. And slow down on your tests. And the next question is from Taylor, who's a 6-year-old warrior kid that loves the Warrior Kid books and podcasts and wants to be a firefighter. The first question is, when are you going to make another podcast? Well, here it is. And I'm actually trying to make more, and I apologize that it takes so long between the podcasts. I will try and do better. Next question from Taylor is pepperoni healthy? Having a little pepperoni sometimes is fine, but I definitely wouldn't make pepperoni my main food. And I don't know how much pepperoni you like to eat, but they do put a lot of chemicals in pepperoni to keep it from going bad. That's called processing. And all that processing and all those chemicals, they're not that good for you. So if you have a little bit of pepperoni sometimes, that's fine if you like it. But I would say don't have a lot of pepperoni a lot of the time. The next question is, do you know how to write in cursive? And the answer is yes, I do. And I think it's good to learn how to write in cursive because you can write pretty quickly when you write cursive. And if you ever come across something that's written in cursive and you don't know it, you might not be able to read it. And also, it helps to work on your hand-eye-brain coordination because you're making a whole new different type of alphabet and letters. So give it a try. And the last question from Taylor is, I think school is boring. How can I make it more interesting? First of all, I would say make things into a game. Make little challenges for yourself. If they want you to learn your times tables, that's awesome. See how fast you can say them. They want you to learn how to spell some words. That's great. See if you can make all those spellings perfect. If they want you to learn about President Truman, see if you can learn everything the teacher knows about President Truman, and then see if you can learn some facts that the teacher doesn't even know. I have fun doing that. And the last thing I'll say is try and tie different things together when you learn them. Try and find out different facts that connect things in the world. For instance, let's say you learn that the world's largest pumpkin weighs 2,624 pounds. That's the world record. And that's pretty neat. But then you think to yourself, maybe, well, what is a pound? Where does that come from? And then do some research. And then you can find out that there's actually a bunch of different kinds of pounds. There's a pound called the Troy pound, and there's the Imperial pound, and there's the Tower pound, and there's the Merchant pound, and there is even a London pound. So when your teacher tells you, hey, the biggest pumpkin is 2,624 pounds, you can say, excuse me, teacher, what kind of pound? I'm very curious. And then maybe you can do a little report for your teacher, and they'll let you deliver that report in class, and you can share and make yourself and your whole class smarter. And that is not boring. It's actually fun. Thank you for those questions, Taylor. And the next question is from a girl named Ryan, who's 9 years old and listens to the Warrior Kid podcast. every day with her dad. Well, I apologize to you, Ryan, that I haven't made more podcasts. You're probably getting bored of them, the old ones, listening to them over and over again, but I appreciate it. The question is, did you ever play games in the Navy for training? And the answer to that is yes, we played all kinds of games. Some of my favorite games that we played, one was called underwater hockey, where we had these little, basically small hockey sticks, and we used a real hockey puck. And when that hockey puck was on the bottom of the pool floor, we would have to push it with these little hockey sticks into the other team's goal. So that was one game we played. It involved a lot of holding of breath and also a lot of sort of Jiu Jitsu type situations going on, because it was very rough when you're playing with a bunch of other SEALs. We also used to do that with water polo. We called it combat water polo, where there was no rules other than you had to try and get the ball into the net on the other team's side. And besides that, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. So those would be some rough games, but they were a lot of fun. And we also ran all kinds of races and did boat races, and we would play football and soccer and basketball, pretty much every game you can think of to have fun and to do when we weren't actually doing our real training. We also played some games in training. One of them that's pretty common is a game called Kim's Game. And that's a game that's supposed to make your memory better, and it actually does make you better at memorizing things. It's named after a book by Rudyard Kipling, and the name of the book is Kim, and the book is about a boy named Kim that's being trained to be a spy. And in the military, we actually would say that the name of the game was because it stands for Keep in Memory, K-I-M, Kim. But either one of those, that's where the name came from. But what you do in that game is someone that's not playing the game sets up a bunch of objects somewhere, maybe on a table or maybe out in a field, and everyone that's playing gets to stare at the objects for 1 minute. And you try and remember as much as you can about those objects, what color they are, what shape they are, what objects there were, where they were positioned. And then they cover up the objects, or you turn away from the objects so you can't look at them anymore. And then you have to write down as much as you can possibly remember, and whoever remembers the most wins. So those are the type of games that we played. And yes, we did play a lot of games in order to both train and have fun. The next question is also from Ryan. And she says, I'm afraid of being home alone. How can I not be afraid of it? Again, this is another one of those questions that I get a lot of those questions about how do I overcome the fear? How do I overcome the nervousness? It's the same answer. I mean, in this situation, first of all, talk to your parents about what you're afraid of, and then come up with a plan to do if that thing happens. You have a plan to follow, a place to go, the phone numbers to call. You know exactly what you're going to do. If the thing, whatever it is you're afraid of, happens, you know how you're going to handle it. And then what you do is you tell your parents, okay, I'm ready. And you tell them to go and come back in 10 minutes. You can make it 10 minutes. And you're going to realize that nothing happened. There's nothing to be scared of. And then when you feel comfortable with that, you'll say, okay, now go for 20 minutes. And when you feel comfortable with that, 30 minutes. And then pretty soon it'll be an hour, and pretty soon you'll realize that there's nothing to be afraid of, that you're a big girl, and that you can actually be fine staying there. And if something does happen, you'll have a plan to handle it. And the last question that I'm going to answer today is from a warrior kid that is 12 years old. His name is Pi, and he's been doing jiu-jitsu for 4 years. And he asks, I did wrestling at school and liked it. I want to do it again, but jiu-jitsu and wrestling are two different sports. What should I focus on to be successful in wrestling? Correct. Wrestling and jiu-jitsu are different, but they're also similar. They're both grappling, and if you're better at one, it will make you better at the other one too. But there are some different rules, and there's some different instincts that you need to develop for wrestling, or you need to develop for jiu-jitsu. So what I would recommend is about a month before wrestling season, which usually is in the wintertime, just stop doing jiu-jitsu and just wrestle for that season. During the season, just about a month before the season, and then during the season, just focus on wrestling. Because as you know, in wrestling, you can't be on your back on the ground. And in jiu-jitsu, it's fine to be on your back. In fact, it's better to be on your back than on your stomach when you're on the ground. So you have to make that instinct change and get the instinct of not going to your back during wrestling season. The same thing can happen in jiu-jitsu. If you're in a jiu-jitsu competition and you go to your stomach, well, you're going to lose really quickly because you're going to get choked. And in wrestling, if you go to your back, you're going to lose because you got pinned. So that's why you want to take a little bit of time between the competitions and get your mindset into that particular sport that you're working on. And for the specific things that you should do to be successful in wrestling, when you're wrestling, you've got to concentrate on being very good at takedowns, on getting the takedowns, on staying on top, and on getting the pin. Now, one thing that happens in wrestling is you might have to start in bottom position sometimes, in referee's position, so you have to be able to get up quick too. So all those things are great things to work on and get in that mindset when you are in wrestling season. And then I would say the same thing happens going the other direction. If you're going to compete in some jiu-jitsu tournaments in the springtime or in the summertime, stop wrestling for about a month and just focus on jiu-jitsu and get your mind thinking in jiu-jitsu. And the good thing about all this is I know a lot of kids and some adults that have been very successful in both jiu-jitsu and wrestling. They train both all the time. And now in this day and age, it's more common to have someone that's a jiu-jitsu kid, especially where I live, a jiu-jitsu kid that starts wrestling, and they do very well with it. And we all have seen as adults, a lot of kids or adults that wrestled when they were a kid, and then they come and do jiu-jitsu, and they're very successful as well. Either way, the most important thing is to keep training. And that is it for questions. And I wanted to read a quick story written by Uncle Jake about when he was a kid and how he learned a little something about life. So here is a story from Uncle Jake. When I was a kid, we had a model building club at my school. We would buy model kits, which are a bunch of plastic parts that you then paint and glue together. And in my modeling club, we used to build all kinds of things, cars and planes and ships and tanks and bunkers and forts, everything. I always got some really cool kits. I mostly liked stuff that was from the military, like fighter planes from World War II and tanks and battleships. It was very fun. Well, most of the time it was very fun. Because see, the thing with models is that they can be pretty tricky to build. Some of the parts are really small and they don't quite fit together the way they're supposed to, and it can sometimes get very frustrating. And the other thing that can be frustrating is sometimes when you finish the model, it doesn't look as cool as the picture on the box because you made some mistakes when you made it. And that's a big letdown because it takes so much time to build the model. Now, we used to have to bring our own models to school. And I usually got about one model every month to build. My grandpa would buy them for me. And there was another kid named Scott. And Scott was really good at building models. And his parents were kind of rich. And they bought him a new model almost every week. And so he was really good at building those models. But Scott wasn't a very nice kid. He could be mean sometimes. And there was another kid named Andy. And his parents must not have had a lot of money because a lot of times he wouldn't even have a model of his own. So he would just help other kids in the class, but he really loved building them, and he was probably the best model builder in the class. And one day I came into school and I went into that class with a new model, and guess what? Scott and I both had the same model to build, a Vought F4U1 Corsair fighter from World War II. One of my favorite airplanes. And I looked at him and said, look, cool. We have the same model. And then, like I said, he was a little bit mean. He said, they look the same right now in the box, but mine's going to look a lot better than yours when we're done. Like I said, he wasn't very nice. We could have just made 2 planes and made it was like they were from the same squadron, and we could have hung them up on the ceiling, flying in formation, and that would have been pretty neat. But Scott was mean. And I couldn't change the way Scott's attitude was, so I just decided I'd make the model look as perfect as I possibly could. And Andy said he would help me. So we started building. We were taking the pieces out of the box and clipping them off the plastic racks that they're held on, and we were sanding off the imperfections, and then we were painting them, preparing them to be glued together. And we spent quite a few classes doing this. Quite a few hours working on this, being very careful, and everything was going pretty good, and the model was looking pretty good until I got to the landing gear. And the landing gear is the wheels that come off the bottom of a plane so it can land. And the landing gear was very tricky to glue into place because it had 2 separate pieces on it sticking out that needed to go into 2 separate holes, and it had to be done inside this tight little place where the landing gear retracted up into the wing. And I was having a really hard time doing it. A really hard time doing it, and I was getting madder and more frustrated, and I got some glue on the other parts of the wings, and that can ruin the whole thing. And finally Andy said, do you want me to do it? Fine, I said. I was mad that I couldn't get the job done. I was mad at the designer of the model for making it so tricky. I was mad at Scott for having the same model as me. I was even mad at Andy for being so good at building models. And Andy took the landing gear from my hand, and he wiped off the mess that I had made with the glue, and then very carefully he placed it into position on his first try. There it is, he said happily. And that was great, but there were 2 landing gear, 1 for each wing. And I saw how easy he did it, so I said, I'm doing the next one. And I picked it up very carefully, and I put some glue on it, and then I slowly started to put it where it was supposed to go, but it didn't want to go in there. Something wasn't quite right about the fit, and when one piece would go in, the other wouldn't fit. So I pushed it. And I pushed it some more, and it still didn't fit, and I pushed harder, and it still didn't fit, and I pushed harder, and I got madder, and finally I lost my temper and pushed so hard that the landing gear snapped. And when it did, I got so mad I slammed my fist down on the plane and smashed it. And when I did, one of the pieces of plastic broke off and was really sharp and cut my hand open, and there was blood and glue and plastic everywhere. And I looked up, and everyone in the whole class was looking at me. Jake, the teacher said, here. He handed me a paper towel to stop the bleeding in my hand, and I took the towel and I put it on my hand, and then I looked at Andy. And Andy's face he just looked sad. And as soon as I saw his face, I realized that I destroyed this model that we had worked hard on. And it was something that he had helped so much with, and it was something that he couldn't have because his family didn't have enough money, and I had ruined it. And then I saw Scott staring at me. And he was standing there with his pretty looking model, and it was coming along great, and he didn't look sad at all. In fact, he had a little smirk on his face. He was kind of smiling. He was happy that I lost my temper. He was happy that I destroyed my Corsair fighter plane. And then I looked around at the rest of the class, and they were all stunned at what I had done. And so was I. I had ruined my plane. I had wasted all the work we had done. I had let down Andy, who would never get a chance to build that plane. And I had let Scott win. all because I lost my temper. Go to the nurse's office and get that taken care of, the teacher told me. I walked out of the class, down the hallway into the nurse's office, where I had to explain to her what I had done. And as I explained it to her, I realized a lesson I would never forget. Losing your temper is horrible. When you lose your temper, you make bad decisions, you make bad choices, and you do things that you will regret. When I walked out of the nurse's office, I told myself I would not let my temper beat me again. And I recommend that you learn the same lesson. If you feel your temper burning, take a breath, take a break, and take control. And that is all we have time for on this Warrior Kid podcast. And if you want to get one of the Warrior Kid books, you can get them at warriorkid.com. And you can get the new book, Mikey and the Dragons, from Amazon.com. And if you want a Warrior Kid t-shirt or rash guard, you can get them from JockoStore.com. And if you train Jiu Jitsu, or you start training Jiu Jitsu and you need a Jiu Jitsu gi for kids, you can get one at OriginMaine.com. And also, that's where you can get Warrior Kid Molk protein mix that tastes delicious and makes you stronger and healthier. You can also get that Warrior Kid Molk on Amazon. And that's it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading the books. And remember what Uncle Jake learned from building model airplanes in school. Don't lose your temper. Now go out there, train hard, study hard, work hard, get after it, and be a warrior kid.